This is the Cap Stable Podcast, CSM 10 Candidate Interviews. If you'd like to help support shows and efforts like these, please consider donating to the Cap Stable Patreon. Link at capstable.net. Pilots, here are your candidates.
Welcome to the Cap Stable Podcast, CSM 10 Interviews. I am your host, Bork, and tonight, Cap Stable innovates again. We will be recording this interview twice. At the request of our guest and his targeted audience, we will record later a French version of his interview you are listening to, with the same questions and hopefully the same answers. With us tonight is Borat Guereen. Thank you, Borat, for joining us and welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what is your background in EVE?
Okay, so I'm Borat Guereen. I'm a candidate for the CSM 10 for next year. And I've been a player of EVE for a little bit more than 5 years now. I've been doing a bunch of different things, especially in nullsec and in wormholes. But mostly I've been playing for the last year as a solo player, so kind of with a few alts. And that's what I want to kind of represent in the future CSM 10 group, is a voice for the players that play either solo, that don't really have the time to get into a bigger corporation or don't want to, or the really small, tight-knit groups of players that play amongst themselves.
So from what I read, it's the first time you're running for CSM. And why did you decide to run this year? And what are your personal reasons for running?
So I've been playing for 4 years without really getting engaged too much with the community. And this year, I've been paying more attention to the forum and to the community at large and getting more into that domain. I also kind of wanted to create something inside the game for solo players, because playing solo is a style, but it's still important to have contact and other people you can rely on from time to time. So I decided to kind of get a little bit more involved with the community. And the next step for me as a player was to give a run to the CSM and to run for CSM and represent my style of play.
So in broad strokes, what is your platform? What are you running for?
So there's a few things that are, for me, pretty important into how you approach EVE as a solo player, and which I'd like to see kind of worked on. And the first thing is one of the things to make sure that there is a capability with the upcoming sovereignty change. I want to make sure that the smaller group have truly a chance to own something without having to rent it. That's one of the important aspect of my approach and trying to support that. But I also want to make sure that features that are introduced in the games are not kind of lobbied down by players that have other agendas. And I'm thinking, for example, about the siphons, which could have been a great tool for smaller groups to raid bigger groups, or the ESS, for example, too, and that in fact got their functionality really cut and undermined, I think, before they came into the game. And I'm not sure for the other CSM if there were really a voice to help support the initial objectives that CCP had for those features. One of the things I'd really like also to see developing more is a nomadic lifestyle, really the ability to kind of get for a long period of time inside the most dangerous space, be it wormhole or nullsec, not necessarily with settling, but moving forward, exploiting, then moving to the next stage. Another aspect for me, I've been drawn to the game initially by the bounty hunter pass. And I was really excited to start playing EVE. And then I really quickly found out that bounty hunting was really not a potential career. So CCP has done some changes which were good, but still bounty hunting is not really where I'd like it to be. And I think a lot of solo players, it's a career that can be interesting for a lot of solo players. So that's the main axis of my on my things around the solo players experience. Now there's a lot of things, and everybody kind of agree with that. Helping new players and new bros getting into the game is an important part. So facilitating that experience for them. And I have a few things that are a little bit more generic, like I'd like CSM representatives to be elected once. This is an important step so that nobody kind of start building a kind of influence on the game. And every player has a chance at some point to kind of run and possibly get elected, even if there are like all the voting mechanism of the power blocks that we know about. I think it's still a good thing for the CSM to be refreshed for every instance of the new CSM. And the last piece would be about the API. I have some issues with the API. Some of the data is way too automatic and easy to acquire or to check out without any in-game activity. So I'd like to kind of curve that a little bit, push toward that direction, as well as the other aspect of sometimes some people call the game a game of alts. It's true. To play, we need to have a bunch of alts, but I like the alts to kind of be known and publicly knowledgeable for a player.
So, as a summary, you want more small group action, like the Siphon. You want more small group ability to influence the game, to live a nomadic lifestyle, kind of a vision that the CCP had initially for the wormholes. And you want the CSM to be elected only once, the API to be tweaked to provide a bit less information and push people to be in-game to do those activities. And you want the halls of players to be visible for anybody.
Yeah.
So drill down about that, about your nomadic lifestyle. So as you're aware, if you are you claim you're a 5 years old player. So you know the initial vision that CCP had about wormholes, where people were just getting their gear in, living a few months or weeks, and moving to greener pastures after a while, and not installing any POS or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want that kind of vision for any type of gameplay, whether it's the wormholes, the new wormholes, the shadowed wormholes, the nullsec, and whatever?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great step for CCP to have added Terra and the new wormhole. That's for sure. I mean, having wormhole with no moon, so no capability to settle, is a great space. It's very recent, so we'll have to see how that plays out in the long term. I myself, I've been living in a wormhole for a while, and it's effectively pretty interesting for a solo player to effectively have that capability. But I know right now the rules kind of force me to stay in that wormhole, and well, it's not that they force me. I probably choose to do that, but I'd like to be able to take my POS, for example, and to bring it in another wormhole in an easier way. It's really done. It's possible to do it, but I like systems like, for example, a ship that can morph into a POS or something like that, or Orca or tier 2 Orca or things like that. That could be ideas that would develop a model where a few players could kind of go through space and advance and position for a few days or a few weeks and then move to the next step without being too difficult logistically to do.
And about your ideas about limiting the CSM representative to only 1 year, even with a 6 weeks patch cycle, the CSM, they really start having some influence on the game at the end of the first year. So wouldn't that be a severe detriment to the CSM?
So my point is only what I'm mentioning is a CSM can be elected once. I'm not against extending, in fact, the tenure of a CSM member over 2 years, because I'm fully aware that effectively taking the time to get to know the mechanics of the CSM and the interface with CCP is important. I would say I think the best probably would be 2 years tenure for each CSM member, and like half of the CSM is elected every year, so that there always be like experimented CSM members that have been there for the previous years that can train the newcomers, and so on and so on. But then any player as a player could only be elected once, and then leave his place to somebody else to represent whatever interest they represent.
Yes, but having 2 elections on half the CSM, don't you think that it would overrepresent the nullsec alliances and the big power blocks?
It would be the same. So if we have it would be the same number of election per year. It would be 1 election per year, and then you would have effectively half of the caucus having to leave out office and being replaced by new ones. It is possible effectively that there can be other rules. There's a lot of discussions that can be done there. Maybe effectively it's important for the CSM to represent every style of play, and CCP put some kind of slots over that in the CSM, and then make sure that effectively whoever is elected represents the style of play that they want represented on the CSM. I think there are solutions to that. The most important aspect is that a player doesn't get to be CSM 2, 3, 4 years in a row, because then there is an influence. At that stage, I would say they become either like a game designer as part of the CCP team, or as a contract or something like that, if CCP values their input that much. But they need to leave their place to new players that will represent kind of new ideas and keep the game moving forward.
About your issue with the API data, is it a problem of API data providing too much information or sensitive information, or you want the player to get in the game and get that information from the game instead of playing the metagame from outside?
So there's no way around the metagame. The metagame exists, and there's no idea to remove the metagame. I mean, it's part of the game, so it's totally fine. The thing is that the API is can provide more information without really having to work on it. And there's two things, 2 examples I have. The first one is about the siphons, which can be identified through the API by reading the API readout on the POS and find out, a POS doesn't have the regular output, so there must be a siphon there. That's a problem, because then effectively you don't have any in-game action. You just, look at your data, do the accounting, and then send out somebody to take care of the siphon, and nobody has to patrol really the area where the siphon has been. So that's one of the problems with the siphon. Another problem I see is for the kill board and what I call myself the dictature of the kill board. I mean, a lot of groups and power groups are really more concerned about the kill board ratio or killed and stuff like that than anything else, which kind of makes the game not as fun as it could be if that was less critical. So in my mind, what I like to see is a kind of a privacy option for each player that they could set. So the default would be that the privacy is set to off, and when 2 players collide and fight and stuff like that, the result on the API is exactly the same as it is today. But if one of the player has put their privacy as to on, then the API would not automatically upload the kill if one of the players in an alliance that use killboard and stuff like that. It would be up to either of the player to load the kill themselves, and the player that has their privacy on wouldn't, the information about what they lost, for example, which is kind of private information, would not be visible. I don't mind, of course, the location is visible, the ship tip is visible, because everybody can see it that was participating to the fight, but anything that would not be visible as the outcome of the fight, like the modules that have been destroyed, would be kept out of the kill boards in that situation, and the kill board would only be updated if either of those players chose to upload the information they have themselves.
That's an interesting concept. On the issue of Killboard, I'm sure that you got some voters that checked who you are in game and what is your name, because you claim you're a 5 years old player, but you're campaigning on your alt.
Yes.
Because you want to promote your alt. So don't you have some pushback from people saying, we don't know who you are, you make claims, you have no Killboard, no history, nothing?
I do, and this is a very voluntary, a very thought-through approach of on my side, and I know I have pushback of people saying, we want to know who you are. Well, my point is that you can know who I am from effectively what I'm sustaining and what I'm saying about the game, which kind of I'd rather have you judge me on these ideas rather than on my killboard or on my participation to whatever nullsec alliance I've been flying with in the past. For me, that's not relevant to what I want to achieve now. It's also kind of a jab to the fact that alt being unknown right now allows me to do that. If effectively for the idea I want to put forward to make the alt public, I would be the first one to release all my alts around Borat and to make that known. But there's no reason for me to do that while, nobody else has to do it.
So you also say that you were for many years in the nullsec, the big blue donut and all those large fights, and you didn't like it. Do you have a vision for the future of soft, for the problems of small scale and small group warfare, and what mechanism should CCP create to promote that kind of gameplay?
Okay, so this is certainly. I've been pretty much a lemming in the nullsec alliance, so I didn't add any kind of major role or anything like that. So again, I'm coming from my experience flying amongst launch fleet and stuff like that. So there's a few things for the sovereignty in particular that I'm first happy to see CCP is tackling that very seriously, and they've shown in the last releases that they are ready to seriously look at issues that have been there for a long time and change them. The fact of removing the cost on the clone death for the clone upgrade is a great move from them. So I have a lot of confidence in how CCP is going to address that. For me, I would totally support something that's activity-based in a sector. So rather than owning something because you just plant a flag there, you would own something because your people would do stuff in that system and on a regular base and develop that. And again. So that could be one of the approach. Now there's probably a lot of things that being I'm reading what's out there, so I'm certainly anxious and interested to participate to the discussion toward activity-based sovereignty change. But there's probably a bunch of things that have to be thought through very carefully to keep the balance for everybody, because it's not about making the solo players or the small players suddenly being able to take off the power groups. Of course not. They should not be able to do that because they choose to play, and we choose to play in a way that's smaller. But at the same time, there needs to be a balance between the two elements and keep them in the game in a different way that they are now, but so that effectively power groups don't suddenly fold and become like small entities. That's not what we want.
So as a first follow-up, what do you consider to be your core constituents?
Well, this is so the core constituent would be players that like to kind of do their things on their own and kind of develop their own assets within New Eden. That don't really, that still want to fly with other people because, fleets and the size of fleet is an important aspect. But at the same time, it should not be the most important aspect. The composition of the fleets and how effectively people can fly as a kitchen sink fleets with whatever they want to bring in. I want people to kind of feel that there is effectively a style of play that's not necessarily getting towards the blob, the massive fleet and stuff like that.
So, on the CSM, what do you think is your biggest strength and your area of expertise? What will you bring to the CSM as a person?
So as a person, I've been a project manager for a long time, so I have certainly that experience. But again, I mean, it's more discussing and thinking. I see the CSM more like a think tank. It's not a decision-making body. In a way, CCP is a decision-making body, but they need a think tank to kind of go through all the different possibilities and have people kind of point out the issues. And it's not necessarily, I don't think, and I hope it's not within the CSM struggle of influence between the different elected members, but it's that each of the CSM member brings their kind of specific game knowledge and where they'd like the game to be, so that CCP can have actions, pretty much, or decisions to make between different choices, while trying to see as much as possible of the consequences of these choices. I have my personal life. I have a bunch of time that I dedicate already to Eve. It's my hobby more than a game. I mean, it's really literally a hobby of mine. So it's the time I would have the time also to dedicate to the CSM, and that's what I hope I can bring on the table.
So many CSM members claim that being a CSM is 20 to 40 hours a week of commitment with weird schedule, because you have meetings at European times or at night and talking to your constituents. So do you think you'll be able to balance your personal life, your work life, your Eve life and the CSM?
Yeah, it's probably the Eve life that will take the bigger hit, but yeah, I believe I do. I mean, I've been working both in Europe and in the US and with various hours already. So I'm kind of familiar. And today, I mean, we have a lot of communication capabilities and possibilities. So I'm not worried about that for my personal time.
So, and for the future and CSM 10, what do you believe is going to be the biggest challenge, the biggest roadblock, or the biggest feature that the CSM 10 has to tackle?
Well, obviously, it will be the big change with the sovereignty and nullsec. I mean, it's a big deal to kind of change the rules under the currently operating thing, and we've seen some of the first rule change already kind of taking place. So there are bold choices that CCP has to make, and I think the main thing that the CSM 10 has to bring is give them this kind of highlight of the potential consequences for every style of play. After that, only CCP knows really how many players are playing that style of play, or from the data analysis. I mean, I'm like any regular player out there. I only see what is being public, and we don't really know. Even myself, I don't really know how many, for example, players are solo players or really living in small groups compared to how many players are living within the goons or the NDOT or this other big group out there.
So as a follow-up, because many people talk about SOV changes and other way to change SOV and talking about small groups, small warfare, occupancy, but often they forget about the link that all SOV has with the problem of Apex Force and those big super entities, super caps fleets. Do you have any idea about what could be done to tackle that issue too at the same time?
Yes. So like I think I mentioned that in my presentation, but I haven't. I chosen to not fly a cap yet. I don't feel I'm perfectly content flying subcaps and training for subcaps. I could fly caps if I wanted to. I don't feel right now I would because of my situation in game and stuff like that. But at the same time, one of the things that kind of so large fleet is a great experience, but as soon when TD comes up, it becomes really grilling to go through a large fleet pack. It's pretty exciting, and I really want large fleet to be a staple of Eve. It needs to remain the same. And it's already a great thing that CCP found the TD as a solution to kind of address the issues that were there before. Now, I would think that to limit the apex force, you have to limit the concentration of capitals in one place. And I've read a few things over the forum, some ideas. Again, I may not be aware of all the ideas out there, but some of the ideas have a special resonance to me. Like I like, for example, the idea to say maybe capitals should be by themselves on one grid. You could have multiple capital in one system, but they would have to be defined by subcapital fleet, and they would be able, for example, they won't be able to target on grid. They would be able to target off grid with the support of another subcap. So that would limit significantly the regroupment of capitals into apex force. So today, obviously, the change in the jump may have addressed some of that already. So maybe again, it's just ideas I like. I'm not saying I have to hear more about these ideas and stuff like that. Another idea I do like is the fact that having the modules in a fleet follow the same rule as a module on a ship fitting, meaning that if you activate 3 or 4 remote rep on a ship, then you lose efficiency on the second and the third, exactly in the same that you do when you fit 2 or 3 modules of the same type in one ship. Because again, everything that kind of makes larger fleet a little bit more difficult to handle, but still possible, but more difficult, will necessarily boost a little bit the smaller groups and have a kind of balancing effect about the power of apex force.
So, and would you also say that the capital modules should affect less the small, like mostly the reps, because there's a huge difference in repair cycles between the normal logistic cruiser size logistics and the capital size logistics?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, I'm not an expert on capital ship modules, so I'm certainly, I can chime in the general thing, but for specifically a module effect or something like that, capitals needs to be the exceptional ship that they are supposed to be in game. That needs to remain a goal, but at the same time, there needs to be effectively to find a role that's not just a subcap plus, if you want. In that sense, by the way, the latest change that's been announced for the next release about the combat CovOps ships that can be detected on directional scan is, for me, a great change, because it shows that these ships are going to get a special role that nobody had before, and that's exactly where I think the game design should go toward finding places for capitals to be really exceptional ships, but without effectively the massive power of regrouping all of them and just breaking everything up around them.
So, question: if you had if you're elected and you want one candidate to be elected with you for the CSM to serve with you, who that candidate would be?
Well, so I made a point to not follow the other campaigns of the other candidates because first I don't know them in games, and I think, I mean, each of us have to kind of expose what our ideas are to all the players to be elected. Certainly, I'm open to anybody that wants to participate. Of course, I'm kind of I want to work with people that are able to effectively recognize other people's point of view and effectively, as a group, highlight all the different aspects that can affect the game when CCP makes a decision about this or that. So, I mean, anybody with an open mind is a sure colleague, CSM colleague for me.
So, and if you had ultimate powers in the CSM and you could remove one patch, one change, one function, what would you remove?
You mean in the game? Remove something in the game?
Remove a patch, remove a change, or add something. But
well, that's an interesting question. My nature is I'm very adaptable, and I've been adapting to really play for the past year. So there's nothing that I remember that I said, oh, okay, that's going to get me a quit, etc. So I think the main thing is to kind of try to dilute a little bit the power of massive number of players over effectively like a gate camp where there's pretty much very little risk for the gate camper and so trying to temper that a little bit. I'm not saying remove it altogether, but just temper it so that there is one chance to do something. Well, as I was saying, that there's something that popped up into mind. I like the interceptors to be under this 1 second server tick time, so that they could be really intercepted when they fly. Right now, it's too easy to fly around with interceptors in NullSec without very much taking risks. So that's one thing I would like to look at.
So, and last question, is there anything else that we haven't covered and you would like to talk about or address before we conclude?
No, well, so the only thing, I'd like to kind of push is for the new players. I think it's important to talk about the new players and how they are integrated into the game. I've heard ideas about setting up like a zone, a new player only zone. I don't think that's a good idea because, this is part of EVE to be effectively dangerous and risky and from the start. But I believe that into the theme of the science fiction that EVE works in, so there could be ways to do like a simulation flight or simulation flight with a ship that the new player can tackle before even undocking and get an experience for flying ships before they really have to get truly into one and get into the wild.
So thanks, Borat, Guereen, and for coming for the show, and I wish you best of luck in your campaign.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And thanks for all our listeners, and stay tuned for more interviews in this CSMX CSM10 election campaign.